Good morning, everyone. My name is Sue Ann Hirschberg. I'm the program director for the marketing program here at Golden Gate University. On behalf of GGU, the Agino School of Business, and our co-sponsors, the San Francisco PR Roundtable, I'd like to welcome you to our Innovation and Practice series, Reckoning, Recovering, and Reopening. But I'd like to take a moment to thank our SFPRRT representatives and the whole organization, especially Jay Rooney and Molly Walker and Sarah Siegel, and our distinguished panelists for making this important conversation possible. And I'd like to give a shout out to our GGU team, which is Zenas, Shawit, Irene, and Harry, who without this would not happen. So with that, I'd like to introduce Molly from San Francisco PR Roundtable. Or Sarah.
That's fine. I will happily take Molly's place. But it's nice to meet you. I'm Sarah Siegel. I work with Greenbrier Siegel Communications in the city, and I'm delighted to help moderate this soon-to-be lively discussion. I do want to mention that if you have questions that you'd like to ask the panelists during this hour, please put them in the chat, and please also indicate who you would like to answer that question, whether or not it's Lisa, Victoria, or Jay. I also mentioned that we will be announcing the PR Roundtable Scholarship winners at the end of the presentation today, so please do stay tuned for that. But I'd like to introduce Victoria Sanchez de Alba of de Alba Communications, Lisa Aboud, the principal with Interethnica as well, and Jay Rooney, who is an adjunct professor with Golden Gate University. With that, we have, if you've looked at the overall kind of description of this panel, there's a lot of different buckets that we'll be talking about, but the one commonality of it is these are current issues that are impacting, our world, our businesses, and our communications plans moving forward. So I'm delighted to kind of kick things off. Let's start with Lisa. I'd love to hear a little bit more from you about how you define equity and how you build the process into your communications plans when you're working on them.
Sure. So at Interethnica, we understand that equity is not a trend. It's not a box to check or a title given to a team member as a reaction to social political circumstances. We are equity in action. We practice equity every day and have for about 20 years. Equity to us is a holistic process that paves the path to liberation for people to move about their day-to-day lives, making choices that are no longer restricted by systems of inequitable practices. I apologize for the dog in the background. It's garbage day. Divestment of resources or structural racism should also be considered. Our team understands equity not only as professionals and academics, but through our lived experiences, and that makes a big difference. You can be empathetic, but you can never lose a harm perpetrated on you because of who you are, how you look, your religion, or anything else. Equity is and always has been the foundation of our practice. I would say, I've thought about this a lot, and we have all these approaches, and it's a big process, and I could talk about it for hours. But I want to say this one thing that is the number one thing when you're creating any kind of campaign, and you want to keep an equity lens or a process equity at the forefront. Identify your audiences, identify goals. That's all a given. You do it on any project. But here's the key. Identify where there's room for input and feedback that will impact the outcomes. And then go back to your audiences. And I work with underserved, marginalized, and non-English speaking audiences, and share how they made a change. Create tools and use language. I use this thing all the time. I call it words you need to know, because try explaining density to people that have never understood density in relation to affordable housing, right? So we create tools to empower people to not just participate, but participate well. And my goal and what gives me joy is having a room or a council meeting or a supervisorial meeting, and I have balance in there. It's not the same faces all the time. And my outreach and engagement and the tools I built made the people that are participating that never participate feel comfortable participating, right? So that is always something to do. Identify that space. And when you're working with community organizations and civic leaders and all of the people that I work with every day on any project, I work with thousands of people on projects, right? Like on Vision Zero, I worked with from the mayor down. Make sure you go back in the end and celebrate their participation and thank them. So like if you're having a series of public meetings, make that last one a celebration.
Victoria, you and I spoke a little bit offline about this because I was asking you, as a communication professional, how can I make sure that my campaigns and my outreach is inclusive of everyone? Are there things that I need to do as a company to ensure that?
Absolutely. First of all, start with the hiring diverse experts who reflect the communities being targeted. And multicultural engagement, it comes from a human interactions, taking into account deep, empathetic, and emotional needs of our customers in order to drive brand relevance and business, and the business impact. And I spoke about this 2 years ago at PRRT as well. You have to, if you want to be inclusive, hire people that that you are targeting. And also too, this is all about the human and emotional connections. And reaching out, reaching does not automatically mean connecting. Your brand will only engage through authentic, human, shared values. So the bottom line is hire people that reflect the community, the people you want to go after, period. Yes.
Is the people that you go after, do you think in some cases that they're an afterthought or not even a thought with most, brand communications?
Was that to me?
To both of you.
To both of us. I think
I see people checking the box. I think a lot of times the checking of the box and the afterthought is unintentional because they don't understand it from the perspective of somebody on the inside, right? So a lot of good intentions have gone awry. And I work 90% of my works with government agencies. And I do think that a lot of times they're checking a box to say, here, I did this. Where's my grant? Where's my funding? But I work really hard to ensure in the end we have measurable results. Victoria and I have worked together for like 20 years. Let me just say,
yes.
We've worked statewide projects. We've worked together so much, and so we both know this. And part of being a good communications person is not just managing your team and creating strategies. It's also managing your clients' expectations and helping them to understand. So while we have equity statements and we do this work internally, I help my clients do it as well, because now is the time, right? And yes, hire people. I had an agency say to me just the other day, but people of color are not applying.
Why are you reaching out to them?
Exactly. So it's, yes. And to Victoria's other point, we collect data. We do a lot of research. We do heavy research in ethnic communities. Research is data, but stories are truth. And story is what's going to feed the campaign. It's what people are going to find relatable to. You can tell them in any language, right? Capture stories, even if it's on a cell phone. Capture realities, capture stories, and share that back with the client who may not have access to these communities. And that makes a huge difference.
Yeah. And I would like to add to Sarah, why a multicultural mindset is a must for business. You know, it is vital to keep pace with the fastest growing segment of the US cultural and economic landscape. And by not incorporating multicultural consumers into your work, you are hurting your agency's growth and your clients' growth.
No, I
Period.
absolutely agree with that. I mean, after our initial conversations, I look back at our media lists and they fall short, and especially since it's such a large part of our community, that I think that we could all do a better job in terms of making sure that, we're not just adding them to the list, but we're speaking to them in a way that resonates with them, because every audience hears something differently.
Exactly, and meet with them and meet with the editors. They'll be happy to speak with you and know more about what you're rolling out.
Yeah. I'd love to switch gears a little bit.
Okay.
This is going to be a bit of a table turner every once in a while, but meme culture I'd like to talk a little bit about. We've talked about inclusivity as kind of an issue and something that a lot of businesses are striving for. I'd love to talk to Jay a little bit about meme culture and what is it? Can you explain what it means in a basic term?
Sure. So before we define meme culture, I think it's helpful if we define what a meme is, right? And a meme is something that is going to be instantly recognizable to anyone who's spent any time on the internet over the past like 5 years or so, right? Those little like image macros, that, people post to Twitter or on Facebook. And that's like a current iteration of a meme. It could take different forms, but a meme essentially is a piece of information, right, that is easily digestible and that quickly spreads online, much like a virus, hence the term going viral, right? And the term actually has origins in evolutionary biology, like in how genes spread. It's a fascinating story, but it's a bit beyond the scope of this talk. So with the definition of memes, right, then meme culture, basically it is a subset of internet culture that is based around memes and is fueled around memes as its cultural touch point. And it is a basket full of contradictions. Meme culture is glib yet serious. It is passionate yet cynical. It is idealistic and nihilistic, empathetic and vicious, all at the same time. It is constantly changing, right? Along with the people who comprise it and the memes that define it. It's different than it was 10 or even 5 years ago. And it's powerful. Meme culture has launched countless careers. It has also destroyed countless careers. It has convinced mainstream America to support great causes like marriage equality, yet also propelled Trump to the White House only a few years later. It is the driving force behind some of our best impulses and some of our worst impulses of a society at the same time. And it touches all of us. It doesn't matter if you work in a quote boring industry, right? Meme culture can make or break you. Like ask the Wall Street firms who lost billions of dollars shorting GameStop this January, right? Because of a meme-driven campaign, right? Ask anyone who's been doxxed or been subjected to an online harassment campaign driven by memes. Ask any of us who's lived in the the living hell that has been the Trump administration over the past 4 years. That was also fueled by memes. So yeah, it's real. It's we cannot say that that's just on the internet. That's online. That doesn't matter. In 2021, that doesn't hold anymore. The internet is real life, and we need to be factoring it into our communication strategies, and the way we conduct business more fundamentally.
I'd love to know a little bit about, so memes are interesting because they tend to be, they're short, they're brief, but they obviously are, lighting a fire under a specific topic. What do you do if you are the victim of a negative meme that, it's like, do you just wait until it goes away and it runs its course in our very quick news cycle? Or is it something that, communicators need to address? And is there a magic bullet for stopping something like that?
Yeah. Yeah. So this is an issue that is multifaceted, and it's a multifaceted and complex problem that's going to require a multifaceted and complex solution that is going to take a whole bunch of resources and political will from both industry and government that on a scale that's frankly unimaginable right now, right? But on a more individual level, so what do you do if, you or your client is kind of the target of a misinformation campaign or a meme campaign? Well, I mean, I hate to say it depends, but it kind of does. I'd say like the more high profile your client is, the more you're kind of have to be forced to address it. If it's, if your client is like a small business or whatever, right? Like the unfortunate, like pizza shop that was, targeted by, that was visited by a gun nut in DC, like a Pizzagate, look it up, right? Yeah, you hate to see it happen, right? But, that's not really like affecting them that much anymore, right? At least, like not, it was a big deal a few years ago, but not so much anymore, right? But if your client is, say like a political figure, for example, right? Like in their subject to one, then it becomes much trickier to address, and it becomes like more, like it's this constant game of cat and mouse, right? Now that in this era, which we can fake videos and even fake like satellite imagery now, it comes down to like these deep, even philosophical questions of like, what is truth, right? How do we determine truth anymore? And ultimately, I think it comes down to, basic, media literacy and critical thinking skills, and being able to step back and think, well, wait, like, why is this riling me up so much, right? Like, what are the buttons that are, that people are trying to push at? Mm-hmm. And as communicators, we are better able to spot those because, that's kind of what we've been trained. That's kind of what we've been trained for. So it's really like up to us in a way to kind of identify when something's fishy, and then, like maybe start taking steps to address it. But it's complicated for sure.
Yeah, no, I'm always interested by the power of, message. We work on messaging. That's what we do. Our jobs are to work on messaging. And something as short as a meme, the power of that message is still, it's still surprising to me how quickly, a meme will pop up online. And by the end of the day, everybody has seen it, because of that shareability of that content, which kind of switched gears a little bit. And in terms of messaging, in terms of that content, to go back to, speaking to an expansive audience, when you're talking about people, like we look at California, for example, and California is made up of an enormous variety of communities, obviously Hispanic communities, Asian American, it kind of, we have a wealth of diversity here. Is doing communications about just translating the original message, or are communicators required to do more to do more? Like what should we be thinking about when we are trying to, approach another audience outside of the one that we've started with? Lisa, can you maybe talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I just wanted to say, I'll talk about that, but I wanted to touch on Jay's point a little bit.
Sure.
About the difficulty that is social media. We as communicators, we have tools and we have a lot of experience, but the landscape right now is changing so rapidly.
Yeah.
Something that was okay to say or post yesterday is not okay tomorrow. Mm-hmm. So we're in a very different time. When you're just translating does not work. the goal is whatever the story or the message or whatever it is we're trying to get across to an audience, you want them to have the same experience as the message was designed to give, right? So we don't, for instance, we don't translate messaging or ad copy or marketing speak. That's a transcreation, and that's done by a copywriter. They write it in language first, and then we give multiple we give multiple choices on how it could be, how you would understand it in English, on how it would resonate with the target audience. For instance, if we translated something into Spanish, recently we did something, it was an ad that we wrote in Spanish, and they have a saying that they use in Spanish: "We don't play dirty," right? And so that we were able to take that and put it back into English and hit both target audiences, which were mainstream English and Latino. Should you be reaching out to different cultures? Yes, I think that when you're creating a communications plan, it's really important to have a criteria that identifies who falls into your target audience. And in the past, the census was used heavily for that. Not necessarily in school right now. On a project I just wrapped, where we actually got a commission to introduce a whole new way of looking at housing and who was important in relation to housing in San Francisco. We weighted it differently based on our current environment. So we took into consideration a very small population, which are people that are Black living in San Francisco. And we prioritized and gave hierarchy based on the goals of making this next housing element more equitable to start the road to undoing past harms, if that makes sense. So we took populations that were most harmed by redlining and bad housing policies in San Francisco, and we gave them priority. Where building a campaign, if you're looking at just the percentage of the audience as a whole, they would have been the smallest portion of the audience. But for
they were
us,
most impacted.
They were right, and they were the most impacted and had the most, were most in need, which is what equity is all about, right? So we look, when you're looking at whatever project you're looking at, look at it for not just based on percentages, especially since census is not that great. We don't know how great it is right now. We don't know what 2020 is going to come out with. Victoria will speak to that, I'm sure, because
we both will. Yeah. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear. Yeah.
A lot of fear, a lot of barriers. But yeah, you want to look at you want to like map out your target audience based on the goals of that campaign.
Okay.
And make sure you take into consideration, I always tell people, look at Title VI if you're wanting to worry about equity. Look at whatever is in place already, language access, human rights issues that are already in place in the geographic area. Look at those things, take that into consideration. And then number one mistake I would say for communicators that we make is we look at communities as homogenous groups, right? Latinx, a big giant homogenous group. I'm from a very different place. I consider myself Latina. I'm from a very different place than Victoria. I'm from Puerto Rico, right? So we have different experiences, and then we live here, and our lives are perforated by being Americanized and being Westernized. So like how you reach people, you really just have to test. And that's why we do all that ethnic research, because without that testing, and it doesn't have to be this deep testing, maybe you have Jay run something on social media and say, hey, what do you think of this message? How does this resonate with you? What do you think of this visual? And he has a group of 10 people, a panel, and he runs these tests. It doesn't have to be this big, expensive, focus group or, survey or individual interviews. Really think about it in that, let's test this quickly and let's get some results here so that we can start to understand the resonance. And then
Yeah, that brings up a question though, Victoria and I were talking about yesterday, is about you're talking about access to technology. And I understand the quick test that you're talking about,
Mhm.
but there's a grand assumption there that everybody has the same access to technology, which is an assumption that shouldn't necessarily be made, correct?
Absolutely.
to a degree, but smartphones, on the other hand, let's just look at one specific community. Let's look at the Latino community. Very, very high usage. And while they may not have been, certain portions, like, we did some work in Fresno and we had to teach some people how to use Zoom. And so we did something and we did it. But if you did something on Facebook and he's in a group, that's a highly, highly, highly utilized tool. Or for Chinese, you do it on WeChat. I mean, social media, smartphones are huge. It's the tool. For many people, they may not have a computer or an iPad or anything like that, but they have that smartphone.
It's become the great equalizer. It really has.
It has. However, some are not able to sign up for their COVID vaccines or know where to go testing at. Those have been some questions, some concerns that I've seen, especially in the farm worker community.
That's the city's communication planning, and that's the planning. It's not necessarily, I don't think it's, personally in my experience, because I work in those communities too, I don't think it's the tool. I think it's when they made the communications plan and they mapped their audience, they disregarded and marginalized that audience like they so often do.
Yeah.
And that is, and then they say, well, they're not technically, savvy, but I will bet my bottom dollar that somebody in that group has access to that kind of technology. And if somebody made an effort, so we do a lot of stuff in person, and went out there and spoke to them in Spanish, they would have been very happy to have that information and sign up.
Jay, is it easy to look at different social media channels and figure out what the diversity of the people that use those specific channels? WeChat, you mentioned, is very popular in certain communities. Should that be part of any planning of campaign, is looking at those various channels and kind of figuring out those demographics?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. That being said, it can be harder to suss out, especially, depending on what are the hot topics, or like, for example, during elections, right? It becomes much harder, because people are waging misinformation or governments rather are waging misinformation campaigns. The use of bots is endemic. And it can, it can skew the perception of what the community makeup really is on a certain platform, right? So you do have to be careful, right? And you do need to approach the process critically,
Mm-hmm.
right? But yes, it is essential. It is a requirement, I would say. Absolutely.
You talked a little bit about the census and mapping, Victoria. Lisa. Victoria, census. We're getting the releases of first information out there, obviously with districting, et cetera. Should communicators use that for determining their outreach? Is it valid? How should we use it, that information in what we do?
Sure. But you want to know who lives in our country, right? And who lives in your county and who you're reaching out to. So any successful PR campaign should know who you are talking to, regardless of the political representation and federal resources. And for example, I know Okay, so the census just came out, right? So we don't know, apparently they're saying that's accurate, but we'll, this is what I'm reading, that it's accurate, but we'll know more information when it's released. We know there's going to be some communities who did not, fill out the form.
Yeah.
A lot, and that's because, and a lot of them are Latino, especially the undocumented. And, there were, I'm just going to go and say this. There were roadblocks, right? And the Trump politicized the census and created fear as he tried to prevent immigrants to fill out the form and wanted to include the citizenship question, which has never been done before. And the Supreme Court struck it down. So then there was a pandemic, okay? And, not able to really do the outreach, going door to door and say, hey, this is important, and so on and so forth. However, there were organizations such as the Latino Community Foundation that actually kicked off the 2020 census, get out the count, with a virtual event to ensure that every Latino in California is counted, was counted in the 2020 census. And so the messaging there was, at stake are dollars for critical health and public health services, as well as a political representation for the next decade. So this foundation provided a necessary virtual space for community leaders to mobilize together in light of the public health crisis. So I just want to give you some background here of what was done. And yes, as communicators, yes, we want to know who lives here, how are we reaching out to them?
Yeah, so it's like you have to look at the census with an air of criticism, where there could be room for error in, obviously, communities that may have a larger Latino population. For example, Salinas, which is where you're from, correct?
Yes.
Is that a community that you would worry about having that level of accuracy on the census?
Oh, absolutely. And even San Mateo County, here in San Mateo County, there's some farm workers here, that people don't even know or think about, in Half Moon Bay, San Gregorio, Pescadero, they're right here. And yes, and some of them were very fearful of filling out the form. And so they had to have organizations such as Puente and Alas. Alas is Ayudando Latinos a Soñar, means that helping Latinos to dream big. They were out there in the community and saying, hey, it's important to fill out this form.
So we were talking a little bit about
I'm sorry. I'd like to expand on what Victoria is saying just a little bit, because we did it for the Vietnamese community in Santa Clara. Victoria's being, let me just talk about how hard she worked on this a little bit, okay? What she did was she identified these community leaders because they were trusted by these communities. And,
yes.
and it was through that trust of these community leaders that people felt comfortable participating in the census. And that is key and hard work that we do as communicators, is identifying people to work as trusted ambassadors on behalf of these issues. We can't assume that everybody knew about the Supreme Court ruling. We can't make any of those assumptions. We have to think that you have to go into a community thinking, we are the ones that are bringing all of the information as the communicator on those types of issues. And I know how hard she works to ensure that they're the right leader. She identifies the right one. She encourages them to get involved. That's what we have to do. That's one of the key things we have to do. I want to talk about trusting the census a little bit. You need to, when you're building these plans, you need to look at other things. Like when I work with the Asian Law Caucus. They have great information. Look at neighborhood information. Look at real estate information. Real estates, financial institutions. Everybody is gathering data. Don't just trust the census as your one core piece of data. They don't even have that great of data when it comes to language or when I do work in multifamily households or multi-generational households, look all over the place. Look at planning departments. Planning departments have great information. They have to, right? So look at those things. Go to elections departments. You can have the list of who's registered. Your name, any registered voter is on that list. I go to other states. I'm working in Tacoma right now. How do I know anything about the Koreans in Tacoma? Well, guess what? I have a voter list that I secured. Look at all, do your homework, do your research, look at other things. The census is not the only thing. It's a great tool, but add in some other data from some other sources too.
Absolutely. And if I can touch on that, Sarah, also to learn your history. About 40% in California are Latinos. I mean, so, we're multi-ethnic, all of that, but we have history here before it was the US. I'm just saying.
Good to remember that. Yeah, absolutely. I would love to switch over to Jay for a little bit. And I know that a lot of us have heard about cancel culture. And I'm myself, for one, am relatively I need clarification on what is cancel culture to begin with. Can you provide context?
Yeah, and I'm honestly, I'm pretty loath to use the term cancel culture because it's become such a right-wing buzzword, but that is the shorthand that that people understand, so, for lack of a better term, I'll use it. But basically, it is, so like meme culture, right? It is a subset of internet culture that's based around canceling people, right? And by cancel, I mean basically punishing people for transgressing a social norm of some sorts, right? And and its current context and the way it's being framed now, we tend to think of cancel culture in terms of progressive movements, but it goes deeper than that. For example, back in 2014 to 2016, it was the right wing that was employing cancel culture against their ideological opposites, right? The exact same not only the exact same tactics, the deluge of tweets, the targeting someone, the pressure on employers and friends, to announce them, same tactics, right? Also, it happens in things that you would consider more trivial, right? There was a recent example of an Australian cheesemaker who was basically canceled in that, he had to take down one of his videos because he was making Parmesan style cheese, right? So the Italian government basically pressures say, hey, you can't say that, Parmesan is the protected term and all that. And then, and it became this big fiasco. But yeah, if you Google YouTube, Australian cheese guy, you'll see it, right? So if that sounds arbitrary, yeah, it's because it is. It is. It's become increasingly arbitrary, and the consequence is much more severe too.
I'm really interested in, for example, in the Bay Area, there's schools being considered being renamed and streets being renamed. And, is that a level of, you bucket that same thing into cancel culture? Because you look at Fox News and they made a big deal about Dr. Seuss and the canceling and printing of a couple books. It's two different things. It's
yeah,
in the same bucket.
Yeah, they are different, totally different. Because here's the thing too. What gets lost in a lot of these discussions is nuance, right? I think when you're talking about historical figures, especially ones, that are so prominent, there's a nuance there, right? It's different than discussing, like someone who said, something ill-advised on Twitter, right? And is getting like bombarded with like 1-star reviews on Yelp, right? It's a different conversation, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, and unfortunately the internet and social media particularly seems designed to, it's basically taken the nuance out of everything, right? And forced us to think of this world and talk about the world in 280 character bits, right? And it's just not the way the world works. And it's and unfortunately, a lot of it is structural. A lot of it is by design.
Sure, but I have a quick question, Sarah. Can I
Sure.
add to that? I mean, but Jay, isn't the Confederate flags and all that part of the cancel culture that we want? Not, I mean, we don't want to do away with it. I mean, put it in a museum that this is what happened, because when people see the Confederate flag and the Confederate leaders at the times, like, wow, are we still promoting white supremacy?
It actually, Victoria, you touched on a very good point there, and it's kind of like, and the thing to remember about like canceling too is it has such like a negative like connotation, right? But the intention behind it is really very noble, and tactically, it can be very useful as it's a very effective way to hold the powerful to account, right? And it is one of the only effective ways that that communities and many marginalized communities have had to seek justice and to enforce justice. And that's something that we should acknowledge. And you're absolutely right. Like we shouldn't like just do away with it at all, right? The question just becomes, how do we kind of like keep it from going too far then, right? So that people aren't like basically being hounded off of Twitter for like a difference of opinion, right? Or for maybe something that was misinterpreted, right? Because a lot of these things are come down to just like differences of interpretation, and because again we can't put nuance into a tweet, so yeah, it's tough.
I'm just I look, Lisa, what do you tell your clients if they are, is it important for brands and people of note should they get involved in that kind of conversation, or should they steer clear? Because I've worked with different kinds of clients. I've grown with clients where they're like, our political views and our views of the world are part of our brand. But then I also work with brands that are like, they need to stay agnostic from, what's going on in the world. And is one way better than the other? Like, what do you recommend?
Yeah, I think it depends on your client, like you were saying. I don't think you should steer a client down a road or a path that is not their goal. There are reasons for people to remain neutral, and not everybody always should take a stand. That's not who they are. That's not what their brand is. I would say out of all of this and all of the things that have happened in the past 4 or 5 years, everybody said to me, I mean, who's Lisa? She's so far left, take a left, and then another, and maybe you'll find her, right? That's me. That's who I am, right? I'm a native San Franciscan. I started my life in the projects. I've lived things and I know things. But I think that the number one issue that we experience, people said to me, I mean, I work as a poll worker because I believe in the civic process. And we cried that night. I had 3 generations of women come in crying, because the votes were already coming in from New York. We saw who was winning, right? And I was in, where was I working? The Haight. I was working in the Haight. And I have to say, after that night, we had a celebration planned, a large Latino celebration, and it was not a celebration, and everybody was, sad and whatever. And I said, you know what? We made a mistake. We didn't listen. We didn't listen. the power of listening is going away, and we have to listen. We had to listen to those people in the Midwest, and we have to listen to our clients and the whys and the rationales behind what they do. And I think that listening, I mean, I recently did a community council and I named them HERD. It was housing element, blah, blah, blah. I don't remember what I came up with in the shower or something, but listening is a skill that we as communicators need to encourage our clients.
Exactly.
And we all need to be better at it. And culture and empathy is everybody. You know, we're everybody. Diversity is everyone. Culture is everyone. You could have a culture of your neighborhood, you know, people that live, you know, in Bayview and people that live in Pacific Heights, different culture. Hello, could be completely the same race and different culture. You can have two people with PhDs from completely different cultures, you know, so we're so mixed up and everything is so diverse and entwined, and we are very lucky to live where we live, but we need to listen. And I think that we have to listen to our clients, and we have to look at the landscape, and we need to find places where things intersect. And we as communicators also need to be comfortable in what we're doing. If you don't feel good about what you're doing on a project, there comes a time where you may need to consider, is this right for me? Do I feel good about it? Is what's happening at the end of the day what I want to happen? But yeah, I think that, Sarah, you're right. We don't push our personal values. We can let them be known, but that shouldn't make us not work to make a client's brand stronger.
Okay.
If they're neutral. If they're going far the other way, I would probably have a real problem.
I have a kind of fun question. I know that it's a fun question that I think that has a lot of nuance to it, where I've used the word Hispanic a couple times in this conversation. Victoria mentioned Latinx and then Latina. And I know there's so many other ways to describe community, but and nationality, my question is, what should we be using for somebody, you know?
It depends on the audience. I mean, it depends who you're talking to. I mean, there's campaigns I work on where they use Latinx, but also too, there's when I pitch it to the media, especially in Miami or whatever, the Spanish media, they can't stand Latinx. They said, we don't use that term. And I'm like, okay, well, Latinos, okay. So it depends on the, you know, on the audience and all that. But as we know, Latinx is a gender neutral, inclusive alternative to Latino. It's inclusion of women, LGBTQ, and non-binary, Hispanics, and the popularity of the term in social media and academic writing, you know, but not too many Latinos like it. I don't like it because we don't come from Latinx country, and we're not an X. You know, an X is like an X. We're not an X, you know, but that's me. Yeah. However, if my clients want to use it, my partner, hey, okay, we'll use it interchangeably, but I tell them too, look, I'll go ahead and do it. Let's use it. However, there's some Spanish language press that don't like to use that term. It's mainly the English language press who uses it.
It is a comfort zone for people that don't know what to say. That's
exactly.
That's what I think it is. But I don't like it. I'll tell you a funny story. The first time Victoria met me, we were at an event in Sacramento. Never met her before. She said, I was watching you all day, and she came up to me and she goes, I was watching you because we were probably the only two Latina women in the room, and she goes, Puerto Ricana. She tagged me right away.
Puerto Riqueña.
Yeah. So we're so diverse within who we are, and it's a comfort given to other people, but it is not part of the Spanish language. Latinx does not exist. That's something like, I have the same feeling about BIPOC. It's people naming other people to make themselves feel comfortable. It's the same as when we were all Hispanics, and you know, everybody fought about that. I say, call people what they are, identify them, let them identify themselves, you know. I use Latinx like Victoria does because it makes my clients comfortable. But do we internally ever use that term?
No,
No.
never. And also to the word Hispanic. I didn't
Never.
know. I mean, when I started my journalism career at Stanford University, I remember some of the Latino professors, Chicano professors, hated that word Hispanic because it's a government term name.
Yeah.
They said, we're nobody's panic. We're not his panic.
Yeah.
We're not spics. I mean, I wish I could have saved that op-ed, but they were like, you know, they were all over that. We are Latino. If you don't know who we are, we're Latino. It's just like whites. What do you guys call you? I mean, whites. Not all of you are white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, right? Some of you guys are your, you know, Italianos, Norwegian, and all that. But you guys are, you know, can you say what, you know, whites, you know, but you also say, hey, I am of Italian background, or Irish or Norwegian or whatever. You know, but us Latinos, you know, the government doesn't know what to do with us too. It's like, oh, who are these people? Hello, we've been here, especially Mexicans before it was the U.S. and we're indigenous too.
Yeah, exactly, and we're indigenous too. Yeah, so yeah.
I mean, we can go on and on, Sarah, but anyway, yeah.
It's hard. We give Latinx because of how it was designed to recognize the LGBTQ and all communities and
but yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. So we need to be respectful too. Yes. If you want to be called Latinx, hey, con todo respeto, with all respect. But I like to be called Latina, or you know, of Latino background, or Mexican. That's fine. But don't call me Latinx, you know, with respect.
Okay, noted. We are coming to the end of this section, and I know I want to leave a little time for to
Q&A.
Well, we didn't have a lot of questions in the chat because I think you provided a lot of information, but I do want to give Kathleen some time to talk about the scholarship program.
So, yeah, Sarah, can I say one thing just real quick that's important, please? Yes. We spoke about how some companies or the powers that be don't, you know, they miss the campaigns, you know, they make a mistake. And the one that really, you know, when COVID hit, the demographic that was left out of the conversation to provide them with PPE were the farm workers. They had no information about COVID. You know, they were not providing information at all, or, you know, how to protect themselves, you know, the risk involved in their essential labor and access to healthcare at all. So it was, you know, and they are, you know, they usually commute and live in crowded conditions and make them more vulnerable to pandemics like like COVID. So how
could that have been prevented?
And they were dying, you know, some of them were dying, and yet they are the driving force that keeps the nation's grocery stores stocked. And so when all this, you know, was happening, this organization in Half Moon Bay, I mentioned it, Ayudando Latinos a Soñar, ALAS, I mean, they deal with, you know, they offer cultural arts and mental health educational to, you know, to farm workers and social justice programs. So they found out that they were not receiving PPE. So the executive director there, Dr. Hernandez Arriaga, who's from USF, University of San Francisco, she's a psychology professor. She found out that they were not, you know, having PPE. So she right away launched Mama's Sewing Project to make face masks for farm workers against COVID. And so the cloth masks were distributed to house cleaners, grocery store workers, and their families. And it was a successful campaign that the community came out and helped. And finally, the health department started giving out masks. I mean, you know, PPE to the farm workers, but it took organizations like this.
is part of the
Get
problem.
the word to
because-
get the word out. But because there was no diversity in whoever was making the decisions,
Yeah.
who to give out some PPE. And I kept asking that and nothing. So just real quick here too. So we get all this press coverage, not only locally, but also national. ABC News, CNN. I mean, they covered it. So we did our job. And there was a benefactor who was looking for someone an organization to provide funds or whatever. They gave them a new building in Half Moon Bay. So the campaign I worked, we helped them get a new building. That was awesome.
Yeah, that was awesome.
So that's the type of work
Let
that
me-
we do as communicators who really care. And it's not just about the money,
Yeah.
it's about our fellow human beings who are being left out.
So the solution, is is composed of a lot of different things, but I think first step is making sure that the decision makers have diverse perspectives. Not just
Exactly, Sarah. And I kept asking, who's making this decision? Because I also sit on the board of San Mateo County Healthcare for the Homeless and Farm Worker Health Program. And I kept asking those questions. And so finally we, they were helping out as well too. And I was communicating with them, hey, they need PPE. So finally, things were
Victoria,
rolling
can
out.
I get a word in? I want to say one thing that's really, really, really important. And I tell my clients this all the time because they are government agencies, which is who should have been taking care of this. They need to have a list of organizations that they work with always, not just on a project basis. And they need to have these relationships and they need to maintain the relationships always. And as communicators, why I'm successful, why Victoria is successful, why Jay is successful is we do that. We work with, we volunteer, we do things for these communities that we serve that is outside of our work, but it is key to maintain those relationships. So when issues like COVID come up, you have those relationships you can leverage on behalf of the communities that you care about and you serve. And I say that is the number one thing. If I could get all government agencies to have a list, they don't have to be 500 agencies. Maybe each city and town has 5 or 10, right? And they maintain the relationships long term. They care and they stay in touch. That's the game changer here, because we can't reach all the people, and where there's no guarantee the press is going to read them. No, but those community leaders that are trusted, they are the difference. They are the difference in our communities. And so for multicultural and multilingual outreach, it is key that you identify them, develop relationships, and understand what they're about, understand their missions, and align your projects with them, and just maintain relationships. That's really what we do.
thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
I would love
Okay.
to keep talking to you all day long. It's very interesting. I didn't get to everything on our list of questions, but I'm sure we'll do this again soon.
Influencers. I can text you. I can email you guys the influencers. Okay?
Well, I'm sure that everybody on this panel will be more than happy to answer questions independently. Feel free to reach out and ask questions if needed. I know I will be next campaign I have coming up, just to make sure that we're doing everything we can to make sure that we're reaching the full community, not just the part that's the easy lift. And I'd love to pass the baton to Molly, who will introduce Kathleen and our scholarship winners, if that is okay.
Hello, sorry to be coming late to a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much. So I just want to introduce, I'm the co-chair of the PR Roundtable, and I now want to pass my baton to my colleague, Kathleen Brennan, who will tell you all about our wonderful scholarship recipients. Thank you.
Thank you, Molly. And thank you, Victoria, Sarah, Lisa, and Jay. That was an incredible conversation. I'm sure a lot of us have taken a lot from it. So thank you. So I am the scholarship chair of the San Francisco Public Relations Roundtable. And I, every year, get to go through dozens of applications with my committee, Jerry Corbett, Brenda Kahn, and Paul Rose. We get to go through all these applications and interview the very best of PR students in the Bay Area. And this year we have 5 great winners. But the reason that we're able to give this scholarship is through the incredible donations that our members, their colleagues give, the money that we raise through our annual Valentine's Day fundraiser. You know, this year we were able to raise $10,000, so each of our students will get $2,000 to go towards continuing their education in public relations or helping them get started in their career. So with that, I will like to introduce you to each one of our winners. I will start off with Mike Gregory. You can feel free to unmute and turn on your video. Mike is from the University of San Francisco, and I'll let him tell you more about himself. Congratulations.
My name is Michael Gregory. My pronouns are Mike, he, and his. And I'm a 3rd year at the University of San Francisco, majoring in communication studies with minors in biology and African American studies. And I just wanted to give a big thank you to the roundtable, of course, my professors, Professor Thorson and Professor Meredith, who are here on the call today. And I'm just excited to do the work and ultimately come back and present to my thesis that I'm working on this year and which these funds are really going for. So thank you again, and I'm appreciative.
Thank you, Mike. Next up, we have Sophia Howard, also from the University of San Francisco.
Hi, everyone. I wanted to first just give a big thank you to all of the PR Roundtable members and the committee that helped select me. I'm so grateful for the scholarship and all that it'll help me continue to learn at the University of San Francisco, and as the chapter president of PRSSA at my school, help really pass on public relations to more students. I'm a senior at University of San Francisco, like I have mentioned, and I wanted to thank my professor, Professor Chen, who is on the call, for all her support. Thank you, everyone, so much.
Thank you so much, Sophia. Next up, we have Lauren Fernandez. And something special about Lauren's scholarship, she is this year's first Patricia L. Hardin Scholarship winner. So thank you, Lauren, for joining. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren. I am a 4th year at Sonoma State. My major is communications, and I have a minor in business administration. And I am very, very grateful for this opportunity. So I just wanted to say thank you to everyone, especially Pat. I am honored that I am actually the first recipient of this award. It's honestly such an amazing opportunity, and I'm excited for everything that I get to do with this. So again, thank you so much. And I also really want to say thank you to my professors and for helping me stay so involved and dive deeper into public relations. And I'm really excited to what else I can do. So yeah, thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Lauren. And next up, we have Holly Nguyen from St. Mary's.
Hi, everyone. I'm Holly Nguyen. I'm from Sacramento, California, and I'm a 3rd year at St. Mary's College. I'm a business administration and communication major studying marketing, digital media, and communication. I'm so honored and grateful to be here today to be awarded this scholarship and opportunity to form genuine relationships, expand my network with PR professionals, and be a part of something so meaningful. I'd like to thank the San Francisco Public Relations Roundtable members for their generosity in funding this scholarship, and the committee for all their hard work. I'd also like to thank all my friends, family, and professors for their never-ending encouragement, especially my PR professor, Dennis Erikin, who is here today, my advisor, Scott Schoenfeld Altman, who couldn't be here today, but is always so resourceful and supportive. Thank you all so much again for having me. It's a pleasure to meet you all, and congratulations to all the other scholarship recipients. Sorry.
Wonderful, Holly. And for any of your friends or family who've missed today's presentation, there will be a recording. So no worries there. But last but not least, we have one more winner, Elena Lenardi from Santa Clara University.
Hi everyone, my name is Elena. I am from Buenos Aires, Argentina, and I'm currently a senior at Santa Clara University, majoring in communications and minoring in entrepreneurship. I just want to thank you all so much for this opportunity. It's truly an honor to be a part of one of the oldest PR organizations in the nation. And I am so excited to be able to connect with, meet, and learn from leaders and professionals in the PR industry. I'm extremely grateful for the scholarship, which I will be using to help pay for my education. Thank you so much.
Back to you, Sarah, or Molly, or Sue-Ann.
Sue-Ann. So congratulations, scholarship winners. We'll be looking forward to seeing what you're going to be doing next and from here on. And come and use us for a reference, or if you need something, we're here to help. And thank you all the panelists for a lively discussion today. As Kathleen mentioned, we're going to be recording this, and so we'll be sending this out to you in the next couple of weeks. Wishing you all a good week, and we'll see you next time.